Grinch grew up without parents. You know, he grew up without a loving home. He grew up in a place where he didn't have people care about him. And every year, every Christmas season, he got to see all these families get together, have these traditions, have these big, you know, meals together and things that were like glaringly absent from his life. His whole childhood, he has felt undeserving of love. He has felt this abandonment. He has had this yearning for these experiences where he felt safe, secure, had these safe attachments. And in his way, like it manifested in his world of, I hate Christmas. I'm mean. I don't want to be around people. And then my girl, Cindy Lou Who.
I know. I was thinking about
Cindy Lou Who comes in for that developmental repair.
Turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up. All I want is to go again.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Therapy Rebranded, where we're consistently inconsistent.
Ding.
Rachel and I are sitting like this, so that means we have a guest.
Ooh, 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 ooh. We're sitting like couples who like are way too into each other.
We're very into each other. I'm touching her leg under the table.
We're actually playing footsie.
We have Rosilynn here.
Hello.
She is a therapist who just opened her own practice, and she's joining us for our episode. We're so excited.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Tell us about what you do as a therapist.
Yeah, so I am a trauma therapist. So I specialize in like complex trauma. So people who have experienced repeated multiple traumas, usually from like a really young age. So I kind of say like my niche or my specialty is like early childhood trauma or just childhood trauma. Yeah.
And are there certain modalities? Are there certain kind of methodologies that you like to use? This is me just nerding out a little.
Yeah, let's nerd out. Yeah, you know, it's kind of, I'm kind of like an eclectic kind of therapist. So I kind of pull from different things, but I think so much of the basics of working with people who have childhood trauma is like just connection, like really basic, like let's water it down. Like, let's just connect. Let me show you that I hear you, that your stories aren't going to be too big for me, too scary for me, that I can sit with you. I can hold this with you. And I think that is something that not everyone has ever experienced, you know, of like, oh, this is too big or this is too complex. And so I think just that first piece is just really that relational, just building, like I can do this with you. So
I feel like one thing that is kind of a specialty that I was seeing on your website is that you're able to do play therapy.
Yeah. So I started off working with the little ones, actually. Like I was working with kids like 4, 5, 6 who had just like experienced big traumas.
What are big traumas?
So these are kids sometimes who have like witnessed people get killed. Like they've witnessed some really scary things. These are kids who are maybe 5 years old and they're going into like their 15th foster home. Sometimes these are kids who have like lost a parent or a caregiver sometimes, or kids who, you know, maybe has a sibling with pretty significant mental health conditions that are like, again, really big and scary at home. So it just kind of depends. But I started off really working with the little ones. And when you're that young, like their trauma is like all through their body. Like their body is communicating the hurt, the things that they've been through, which I think for people who don't have a trauma background, they're like, this kid is too much.
They're off the rails.
They're off the rails.
Very judgmental.
Defiant.
Yeah.
You know.
And a lot of people think that like, oh, you're sitting down doing talk therapy with kids.
Yeah.
But you're not.
No.
So can you tell us what play therapy? And you don't do theraplay. You do play therapy specifically.
Yeah. So what I think like, I remember a professor said to me one time, like, therapy doesn't always have to look like therapy. And that, like, stuck with me. So I think sometimes being with kids, it's like we're sitting on the floor and we're playing a game, a board game, you know, and we're working on our distress tolerance or, you know, our frustration tolerance. So we're taking turns, we're using communication. When he loses or when she loses, we're not like flipping the board over, you know, that we can kind of slow things down and kind of like I mean, again, it looks like play, you know, but there's usually like a reason. There's usually like a method behind the madness, or sometimes using art, you know, so maybe just using art in different ways to express ourselves, or a dollhouse. Like I really like using dollhouse play, and then being able to kind of play out different themes or different things that might be going on in their head that doesn't maybe quite communicate to just like a normal person talking with a 5-year-old.
Kind of like their trauma comes out through their play.
Yeah, I think like play is like the natural language of kids. So when you're on the ground, on their level, joining them in those activities, you can kind of start to pick out like what are themes or what are things that we're noticing in the way that they do, you know, X, Y, or Z, or how do the relationships in their play interact. So
I feel like when you're doing play therapy, you kind of have more than one client because you have the kid, but then you also have their parents.
Yes.
So what's that part like? Like if I'm a parent bringing a kid, if I'm bringing a kid that I'm concerned about, like let's assume that this client has like a caregiver who's really invested in them and like attuned to them and knows something's wrong and is bringing them in and is really worried, and like how do you manage that, or how much does the parent get to know about like how the quote like play? I mean, I'm sure from their perspective it's playing, how the playing went.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I think like it is like, I think the parent and that caregiver work is so important because I think the kid needs to see like, hold on, my grown-up trusts this person. Like we can all join and do an activity together, you know? So I think a lot of times with the caregivers, I'm reminding them like, you know, I'm here not just for the kid, but for you. Like we can do mutually enjoyable activities together. And like letting the parents know, like, I'm still going to like your kid. Like you get to come and tell me all the hard things that are going on at home and at school, and I'm still going to like your kid. Because I think the parents also need just as much like holding.
Oh, they do.
As the kid does, if not maybe more.
I think having a kid who's like chronically like dysregulated, which that would look like, you know, just like not really being in control of their body or their mood. And, you know, not even with support, maybe being able to kind of pull it together at times. I think they're also worried that like we're going to judge them. Like, oh, what did you do as a parent to have a kid like this? Which is obviously not how we're thinking. But I think they're worried. Yeah,
they are worried. And I think like sometimes too, and I think there's this like generational piece too that comes into play that I've seen is like parents who come to me and they're like, if I was a kid and I was doing this, like I would have gotten the you know, the mess slapped out of me, or I'm trying to do things differently and I don't know what to do, you know? And I think there is like that stigma of like help seeking behavior in general, but like, especially for a parent to be like, I don't know how to play with my kid. Like nobody played with me when I was little. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to, you know.
And I think it's also, you know, it's that balance of I don't know your kid better than you know your kid, but I also, you know, I want to help you like learn more about your child. Or I want to help you communicate better. And I might know different ways about communication, but I don't know your relationship with your kid better than you do. And I think a lot of parents come in like maybe like just afraid that you're going to tell them what to do with their kid. Do you feel that sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think sometimes it's hard. Like I think a lot of times by the time parents are coming or bringing their kid to therapy, they've probably had enough people say to them, like, your child is this or your child is that, or had a bunch of phone calls already at school or emails. And so I think a lot of times there is kind of that like fear of, you know,
pointing the finger.
Like, what are you going to think of me? And so I think that's always really important for me in my work for parents to know, like, I'm like, we're a team, you know, like we're a team in this, and I see all the strengths that your child has. And that's usually one of my first questions I ask parents, especially when there's big stuff going on, is like, what do you like about them? Like what makes them special? And really kind of pulling on those inner strengths.
Have you ever had parents struggle to answer? Because I have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or the worst is when you're like,
it's worse when you throw them a softball in front of the kid because you think,
I'm like,
this was like earlier in my career, but like fucking brutal. Throw them a softball because you think that they're going to be able to answer the question. I don't do that anymore, but you think they're going to be able to. Well, then you have to start filling in the gap for the parent and start saying things, I think, like around just like coaching, because I don't genuinely think you don't think there's any strengths about your kid. You just don't have the language.
Right. Yeah.
So then you have to start doing that. Like, well, I can see you really get excited when they do this.
Totally.
And you celebrate them when they do that. Like, you have to help them, like, point it out. Because most parents can find something they love about their kid. They just don't have the words to talk about it. And they're so frustrated. And, like, a lot of parents don't know how to celebrate children for anything but accomplishments. And so when their kid's not accomplishing a lot, they don't know what to do.
Speak on it.
They're like, I love them and I'm here. Like, they don't know what else to do.
Like, how am I supposed to be praising? Like, just in general? Like, I like them as, like, a person? Like, what are we talking about?
Right. Or it's, like, finding that and statement. Like, oh, they're, like, you know, they're such a, you know, whatever. And, like, I also know that they're really creative, you know, or, they're really,
they're not all this trouble kind of making or kind of disruption. It's not all of one. It's not the whole package.
Right. Yeah.
Before you came on, I was looking at your website.
Yeah.
Because it was so
very cute.
Thank you. I was telling her, I was like, you have like a brand already. It's just, it looks great.
She's a brand identity. All of the colors.
It's perfect.
It's so cute.
You guys, I went to school to be a therapist, not to make websites or to like
Black girls in STEM.
Right?
Love to see it.
So
love to see it.
Right. Swipe up if you want like website design.
Yeah.
Me to me.
Right. I wanted to be really mindful. I think the amount of times I've gone on to therapy websites and I'm like, where's the pictures of brown kids? Where are the pictures of people with a hijab on? Where are the pictures of, you know, just, I think like so many websites, like there's not a whole lot of representation. And so I really wanted to be mindful of at least having somebody go onto my website and be like, wait, that looks like me. Or like, hey, that looks like my mom, or that looks like my dad, or, you know, my daughter.
You look like me.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to call it Find Your Peace?
You know, I've always said, so puzzles are like my jam, you guys. Like, I do jigsaw puzzles. It's really nerdy. But I've, like, said, like, I feel like a puzzle is such a metaphor for life. Like, I take out my little 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and I spread it out. And I have to start by flipping over all the pieces. Like, you can't start on a puzzle before doing that. Yeah. Anyways, just etiquette. But when you spread out all the pieces, you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to finish this. Like, this is going to take forever. You know, there are certain pieces you try to piece together and it doesn't quite fit. And you're like, oh, whatever. But I feel like when you go back to it and you take time and you try things different ways, like eventually things kind of come together. And so in launching my private practice, I kind of felt like people who've experienced childhood trauma, whether it be in working with kids or adolescents, teens or adults, I think all of the different pieces of our story have significance. You know, like even those dark, jagged pieces, you know, somewhere fit in our story. And I think, especially for people who have complex trauma or childhood trauma, there are so many narratives that no longer serve people. So being able to kind of piece things together, see themselves in a new light, see themselves for the full picture of who they are. I'm like, I'm here to help you find that. Like, let's find your piece. And then I did the little play on words with like the PIECE.
I love that. Very, again, great branding. Not saying that that was why you did it, but great branding.
It helps. It helps.
Yeah. So we're going to start with these Reddits, and then we'll get more into the childhood trauma. Okay.
I'm ready.
Cool. All right.
Oh, God, this one punched me already.
This is a family one. Okay. My daughter's recollection of her childhood is different from mine. My daughter, 39, is always bringing up some random fact about her childhood that resonates negatively. Today we were talking about the election, and she says we never talked about politics growing up, so I'm having to learn all about it now. We never talked about anything, to be honest. My reply, what do you mean we never talked about anything? She says we never had the sex talk, even a period talk. We never talked about politics or anything financial. She also blames me for being a shitty housekeeper because I didn't make her clean regularly. Now, I was definitely not Mother of the Year, but her father was abusive and left us when she was 4. She was my world, and I ended up marrying a wonderful man who was a great stepfather. Don't we all just do the best we can? ? I just don't know how to respond to this. She's obviously been in therapy a lot and has come to some strange conclusions. It's very upsetting, and she's always treated me rather poorly on many occasions, even though I've had to come to her rescue too many times to remember. Do I apologize for something I don't remember? She demands I treat her with respect, yet she doesn't reciprocate. when I saw this, it really resonated with me, not because of my own experience, but just because of like, I feel like this is a generational divide that's happening right now between a lot of people our age and even older and their parents. Like millennial, some Gen X and their parents are like kind of trying to circle back. And I feel like parents feel blindsided, misunderstood, frustrated. They feel like therapy, like I genuinely think some people feel like their kids joined a therapy cult or something.
They feel like offended or something. Yeah.
Well, it's hurtful. Yeah. I mean, like from a parent perspective,
it's like betrayal.
I'm not saying she did everything right as a mom, but from a parent perspective, you have one like thought about how you did it. And then your kids are coming back and telling you, I feel differently. But in our own like millennial Gen X way, it's like our version of trying to connect and be authentic. And like she needs mom to accept that so she can be herself. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. You know what stood out to me about this, though, is so this is obviously coming from the mom's perspective, right? And I think it's interesting that she brought in, but her father was abusive and left us. And I just, like, want to circle that part because I'm like, boom, this is the pain. Like, this is the pain point. And I imagine that while her daughter's experiences were very real, like, we're not discrediting that, I'm thinking about the mom, right? In this trauma that she's probably holding of, I was in maybe a domestic violence situation or I was in this abusive relationship. Like she's in survival mode, you know, like her fight, flight, freeze, like she's in that like defense. And so while she's probably like, I'm just trying to keep my family safe. Like you just left, like I'm trying to hold it all together. Daughter's like, well, why aren't we having the sex talk? Why aren't we doing that? And mom's probably like, right now, we're just trying to survive. I'm just trying to keep you safe. And so I think about just like that collective healing that, you know, while like, you know, maybe it's the young daughter, you know, whoever that's in therapy that's being authentic, like you said, and trying to connect and put these pieces together. I'm also thinking about this mom who's probably holding on to things that maybe her daughter doesn't even know about or her daughter maybe doesn't remember. And so like both can be true. Yeah. You know, they can both be true.
I also think like that piece is important because it highlights how much of the mom's reaction is about her and her experience more than it is about like what's being brought to the table in this moment.
What are you trying to do in a family session with these two? I have like my thing in my head, but I'm curious from like, I don't work with families. So.
Yeah.
It would be interesting because I feel like if these two came to family therapy, I bet they wouldn't have shared goals. Like they'd probably have different things that they wanted to happen in session. So I feel like there'd be a lot of work around getting to shared, like, what are we trying to get to? I think that would probably be a lot of work. But I think it would be being able... I mean, assuming that both are adults, it'd be like them being able to hear each other. I feel like it'd be a lot of work around that and giving like grace
like building
to each other,
kind of.
Okay.
And holding space, I think, for the other person's narrative to be different. Like you need that in the family system. And obviously mom would have to be open and willing and ready to that. That would be assuming she's showing up, willing to do the work and like ready. But I think that would be a big part of it.
Yeah. I think I go to too, like, I would want to know, like, I'm going to, like, the attachment stuff. So I'm like, tell me about the times that did feel good. You know, and I would be curious what their shared experiences have been and what daughters' perceptions were of, like, these are really positive experiences and then what mom's were. Because I think that also can kind of give insight into, like, the attunement between parent and child and, like, what is my child needing versus, like, what is my child taking in from me, you know? Because I think sometimes there is like a disconnect where mom's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm doing all the best that I can. Whereas daughter's like, I just want you to have like one of those, you know, parent talks with me. And that would like, you know, do it for me.
Yeah. Do you ever, when people are adults and like, let's say you have a client who's like 40, then maybe have a parent who's 65 and they're reprocessing with you some of their childhood trauma. And they're like, hey, like, I think I want to bring this to my parent and like tell them what they did.
Yeah.
What is your kind of initial reaction? I know that's general, but
right. Like... you know, I think like, again, I think it can be really like empowering for some people to be like, let me tell you how this affected me. Like, I think there's something that you can honor about that, like, bravery in doing because it's not easy to, like, stand up to your parents.
Yeah.
But I think I also want to know, like, the function of it. Like, what, you know, what is this going to do for you? Like, let's pre-live this. Like, let's think about what, you know, if they do really like your reaction, like, what would be the best case scenario? And then, okay, we buck up our courage to have these conversations. And what if it doesn't go well? You know, how are we going to manage that?
What I find that, like, when people come in wanting to do that, like, family repair or, like, have hard conversation with adults, it's also around what, like, shouldn't they expect? Like, what, and not in, like, there's, like, a should or shouldn'ts, but people often have, like, expectations of having the conversation will make me feel closer to the parent, and it probably won't. Or, you know, it's going to move the relationship forward, and it might not. So, like, how do you kind of structure people's expectations, maybe?
Yeah.
It sounds like, too, it's more just, like, more than is, like, setting up the expectations for them, because, like, you can't give them, like, a spreadsheet and be like, if you do this, it'll go like this. If you do this, it'll go like this. You kind of just let them process out loud and get to the root of why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And if it's, like, to be seen and heard, which is probably what it is, then you have to process, are you going to be okay if you're not seen and heard? And what are you going to do if you're not okay while you're seen and heard?
Right. Or, like, what does seen look like for you?
Yes, that's a great one.
Is it nodding? Is it them saying, okay, I hear you? Is it them apologizing?
It's usually that one.
Right?
It's usually that one.
It's usually
if it ain't an apology, it's not good enough.
Can I ask you guys? So I've got an experience with this.
And even that doesn't hit sometimes.
Right.
So like, this is something that I did with my parents. There was a point where I was like, oh, I've done all this therapy. I'm very secure with, like, my parents would ask, my mom would, you know, I don't know why you couldn't love me enough not to do drugs. I don't know, like, all that kind of shit, right? And then I finally did a bunch of therapy on my own, truly have a very strong, like, understanding of it finally at age 40 or, you know, whatever it was. And I thought, well, they're intelligent people. They're, you know, I really thought there was one night that she asked again. And I'm like, well, if you really want to know, I know. And I view it as one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life, trying to like impart that to them, because the reaction was beyond what I would have ever guessed. Like, sort of what you're talking about, the attacking back and gaslighting, like, to where I was like, well, you know, I had a stutter when I was a little kid, so I think that led to some insecurity and all this stuff. And my mom's like, oh, your stutter wasn't that bad. And I'm like, why was I going to speech therapy for 5 years? Like, what are you fucking talking about here?
Yeah.
Is there, do you think, and I've now, the only thing that, like, I'm over whatever, that you don't get that validation, I guess. But now I kind of just wonder sometimes, like, what the fuck is in their head? Like, do you think it's that they're too scared to confront any possible, and I wasn't blaming them at all, like, genuinely not blaming them, but they interpreted everything as blaming.
Yeah.
Like, do you think they're too afraid to face things that hurt, or do you think they just truly don't see it that way?
I don't know. I mean, I mean, when you were saying that, I imagine you said, like, oh, your stutter's not that bad. It's like, maybe when you say I had a stutter and, you know, it was this, like, what they're hearing is, oh, I wasn't a good enough parent, you know? And so I almost wonder if, like, that's, like, their, it's almost like a gut reaction to be, like, or a knee-jerk reaction, to be defensive and be like, well, yeah, it wasn't that bad, or, you know, kind of minimize it.
I feel like people feel, I think there's a lot of people who don't live in the gray space, so they don't feel like multiple things can be true.
Yeah.
And so when they hear you saying, like, you're a bad parent, even though that's not what you're saying, like, the only way I feel like they know how to salvage the relationship is to prove that they're not a bad parent, because if they were a bad parent, like, what does that mean? What does that look like for you guys going forward?
What does it say about them?
It's the total opposite direction that you should go. Yeah. Right. And I think I actually just had a mom this week who I sent this video to, explaining, like, basically how to, like, parent with validation, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, playfulness, pace. And I was just like, sent it to this mom because she said this to me, and I really heard her. She was like, I know I'm missing a piece of the communication, but I feel like you're telling me that I need to let my kid run the house, and that I have to agree with agree with everything they're saying. Like, she really felt like validating was agreeing. Like, there was no space in between.
Ooh, that's the one.
And so I think, like, parents also feel like, well, if I don't remember it like that, and if I validate your feelings, I'm agreeing. Like, I'm conceding to that being the story, and I'm not okay with that because that's not what happened.
Yeah.
Like, they feel attacked and misrepresented, I think.
No doubt.
That's not what you were doing.
That's 100% my feeling. Like, it was so confusing to be like, I'm not blaming you. Like genuinely in my heart, I don't bother, but I just try to say some general truth. Like, hey, Dad wasn't the warmest dude in the world. Like, that's something she says herself constantly, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, suddenly that was a giant violation. And I'm like, I'm not mad about it. I'm not. Right. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, here's some comments. And I think that some of them were, the ones in yellow are like kind of just people who are with the kid.
Yeah.
But then there's some interesting ones down the way. I don't know if you guys want to see them, but
yeah.
My mom also has a different recollection of my siblings' childhood. My siblings all agree with my recollection, but my mother insists that she is correct. Ooh. We have decided that she isn't ready to face some of her actions and neglectful actions that cause us harm. It is hurtful to us, but we understand that she can only be in the headspace she is in. Mm-hmm. There is still consequences. We don't leave her alone with grandkids. We talk and visit less. Original poster, please accept her feelings. Think back seriously about your actions and inactions before excusing her memories outright. Then, see. Thing is that memory isn't a photographic recording of our past. Memory is imperfect and subjective and can change over the years. The longer and further you move from that situation, the more it changes or be changed by your thoughts and recollections and jump by who you are now compared to who you were. I have major differences with my recollection of things compared to my mother. She saw things one way and I saw it in a different context. Yeah. I do think like time and different age really, really can account for different perspectives.
Yeah. It's two different realities.
And I do empathize with the parents who say to me, like, I've had this parents like offline from family therapy, basically like afterwards be like, Jave, I swear, like, I did do this, blah, 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 but I just don't feel like she sees me for, like, when I do it right 90% of the time. Yeah. And I, like, want to validate those feelings, too, because they feel like they're trying.
Yeah.
Some parents will say to me, like, I just can't try harder. And I'm like, I don't want you to try harder. I want you to try different.
I love that.
I think you're trying hard enough. Like, this is not an effort issue. You got to try some different things. Like, not everything works for everybody.
Same effort, different tactic.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to, like, what does the child need? You know, like, and kids need different things. You know, like, validation looks different for different families, for different kids. And so I think also figuring out, like, what is it that makes your kid tick? What is going to make them feel heard? Which I think is going to be different.
Yeah.
So
I also think, too, I totally get, like, I think what parents are looking for from their kids is, like, appreciation and grace.
Yeah.
And I actually think if they could just hear them, they would probably get it at some point.
Yeah.
A little bit of validation would go a long way.
Yeah.
You want to do the next one?
Sure.
Okay. Gabe, we good with the camera?
Yep, we are now.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
This one's messy.
This one is messy. This one is not as smart.
All right, Rachel, let's go.
My wife confessed to cheating on me after I donated to a kidney to her. I couldn't help myself. My wife, 30-year-old female. This is from today. My wife, 30-year-old female, and I, 30-year-old male, have been married for 6 years and together for 10. We have a 4-year-old boy. A few months ago, I donated my kidney to her when she needed a kidney transplant. We were extremely lucky as I passed all the match tests, blood type compatibility, tissue type, cross-match test, PRA test, etc. And I was considered a healthy donor after extensive testing, CT scans, MRIs, etc. The surgery itself took a few hours and we did home recovery for 3 months. I got a lot of thanks from my wife's parents, her siblings, and then finally, of course, my wife. Finally, of course, is hilarious.
I mean, he's mad now.
He's pissed.
I'm thinking about all the things he listed off. Yeah. Like, this is time.
Oh, no, he's a list, honey. I, however, did this without hesitation because I loved my wife. But a month after our recovery, my wife confessed to me that she cheated on me many years ago. It was a one-night stand. Oh, she hates him. She said she couldn't keep it in anymore, especially after the massive sacrifice I made. Jesus.
She shouldn't have told him.
No, at all. She seemed extremely remorseful, and I believed her that it was a one-time thing.
Okay.
I was, however, extremely distraught. I got frustrated and extremely angry, and did not speak to my wife for a week. Last weekend, I asked my sister if she could have our son for the weekend, and my sister agreed. The reason for this was because I wanted to blow off a lot of steam, and I did not want my son in the house for that. Oh, he wanted to go off. And I did. I don't usually get angry much, but last weekend I did. All my pent-up emotions bubbled up, and I said a lot of horrible things to my wife. I wanted my wife to say something, but she said nothing and was crying, and that angered me even more. I then made her call her parents and siblings to confess about her cheating.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah, that was horrible.
I got chills.
No, that's horrible.
That was horrible.
No, that's horrible. I didn't even get this far.
and also, I just have to say that, like, I understand the initial reaction, but if you guys want your marriage to recover
you
from
can't
this,
do all this.
It could have recovered from the one night stand a couple years ago.
Yeah, it could have recovered.
Maybe.
That was the first time my wife said, and then I made her call. Yeah, that was the first time my wife said something, and she seemed really hesitant about it. But I told her I would, leave her if she didn't, and so she did. She called her parents and her siblings and told them that she cheated on me. Jesus Christ. That finally made me feel better. Sick. Oh, that would make but now I'm like sick. Ugh. That finally made me feel better. And I lost a lot of my anger after that because you embarrassed her back. My wife, however, has just been crying a lot, but I'm not really in the mood to console her. All I'm telling my wife is not to cry when our son is there and to do it alone in the bathroom or somewhere else. Well, this is why she's cheated. Am I the asshole? What are we going through is still a work in progress, and I think our marriage can survive, but I will need some time to get over it. And then people were kind of having their different opinions.
I feel like, just to zoom out, right? Like, this story's horrible. And just to zoom out, I feel like in moments of anger, sadness, and despair, people cause a lot of harm to their relationships. Yeah. Like, this isn't like being like, oh, he didn't have the right to be angry, but like leaving for a week or two probably would have saved like a lot of repair work in the marriage and relationship.
Yeah. But leaving for a week, he had me with that. I was like, oh, good. Like, he took some time.
But I'm saying, like, for real, like just like blew off steam by himself, processed it, decided what he wanted to do.
He went into punish mode immediately, which is where he loses me, of course.
Would you guys, I feel like it would be terrifying to give up a kidney. Sorry, side
note.
No.
I was surprised because normally they don't let spouses, I thought.
Well, you have to be a match. You just have to be a match.
Right.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I'm kind of thinking about, like, okay, she's been holding on to this, y'all.
Yes.
So, like, can we go back to all the things? He's had MRIs. He had, there was a lot of time where she was like, oh, he's in it to win it. Like, he's not backing down. And I feel like
she should have never told.
It's either you don't tell, I guess, or if you're going to do it, tell him now. Tell him before we're one kidney down.
She needed that kidney,
you know what I mean? And so I almost am like...
Does it feel manipulative to you?
It feels a little manipulative. I'm not going to lie.
No, the manipulation is fair. But it is. The group call is wild. The group...
But it's also like the let me hurt you as bad as you hurt me.
Yeah.
Almost like, in the one hand, I feel like, is embarrassing your wife, is that going to fix it? No. And I'm like, you made your bed, lay in it. You know what I mean? Like, if you cheated on me and asked for my kidney, then you be the one to tell your parents why I'm mad.
I don't like that the reason she told him is because she felt too guilty.
Yes.
That's not why you tell me. You tell me because I deserve to know.
Yeah. Not because you couldn't hold water.
Because you can hold water.
Yeah.
After you weren't gonna die.
Because you weren't guilty until you figured out that you were gonna live, which is actually kind of nuts. Because it's giving she wants to leave.
Yeah, don't you make it like she sounds like a lizard? Like, for doing that. Like a lizard, for just like, wait till I get my kidney and then just do it.
She used him. Yeah, I got it.
It's like just cold.
I feel angry.
Yeah.
Are you the asshole? You're an asshole for that moment, but you're both maybe there's bigger issues.
You guys are kind of acting like it's like the whole making her confess to her parents is crazy, and it is. It is. No, it is. But
no, it is.
And you want to work it out after.
I totally understand. No, it is crazy. I would never fucking do it.
That's I'm just saying they're both nuts.
It's not worse than the cheating.
No,
but I also feel like if he knew about the cheating, would he have not given her the kidney? I doubt it. Would you?
I don't want to do it anyway.
How much of the motivation... Okay, this also feels very, very, blunt, but how much of the motivation for giving the kidney is because they have the 4-year-old together over the fact that they're married?
All of it.
I feel like having the 4-year-old together is like, for me, if I married to him, if I'm the opposite, that's 75% of it.
Yes.
Sorry. Not that I don't love my partner and all of this, but like, it's also like a sacrifice you're making like for your child.
100%.
No, it had to be said.
Like, it would be something I would consider if I wasn't with him, but he was like a solid human and a great dad who was co-parenting. It would be a harder thing to do.
I don't want,
but it's way more about the kid than it is about the
like,
marriage.
if my child,
sorry.
No. I don't think that's too blunt, though. I feel like that's real, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't face your son when he's 10 and go, sorry, son, I just wasn't willing to give her that kidney.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, your mom
really
had to die.
want to keep playing pickleball. Like, I just couldn't not.
I couldn't do it. I'm so sorry. I couldn't get over whatever my issues are so that you can have a dad.
Don't like
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, I think, like, it's all awful.
Yes.
And I don't think the cheating would have changed that much. I mean, he's still saying they can even work through their marriage.
I just want to say this on behalf of married people, is that...
you on behalf of married people?
I think I have the right to speak on behalf of all of them. Yeah, absolutely.
Say?
Yes. I speak for all men everywhere. And I'm not saying I fucking would do this or say this, but I can relate to the feeling of when you get a divorce and shit breaks up and you're so entwined in each other's families. Like, I mean, they're your family. Like, it's very...
Yeah.
And you know that your significant other is going and trashing the shit out of you if they're a shitty person or at least not a cool person. It's so... The injustice feeling, is crazy. So I'm just saying, like, I can see that.
No, you're completely
being
right.
an impulse.
The thought in my head, I literally just have a thought in my head of, like, my husband calling my friends, like, calling you and telling you that, like, I cheated and you're like...
Well, it would be like,
crazy.
no, like, Rachel, you say
she doesn't
like,
give a
I'm
fuck.
calling you. You tell him. You tell him what you
That's what I'm saying, like, being like, yo, like, Rachel, tell Javay that you cheated on me.
I would be pissed if you cheated on me.
No, you would. On somebody who was really good. But she would probably...
Just in general.
She would probably already know.
A part of all of that.
No,
His family doesn't know. But Gabe made a good point. There, if it feels like his family too, and he feels like he wants the narrative be out there about why their marriage is struggling.
True.
Sure.
Is it rational to say, like, I know, and it is crazy to make her, but it's...
I mean, he could call, he could tell us.
Well, wait a second. Did he make her call? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's a little better, actually, than him calling and going, here's what happened. Your daughter cheated on me. Like, what does that phone call sound like?
It's better for everybody but her, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But could you imagine your daughter, I know your daughter is like 5, but could you imagine your daughter at 20, like, calling you sobbing on the phone and being like, okay, Roger, I'm gonna tell him. Okay,
my stomach just flipped.
Dad, I cheat. Like, wouldn't you feel like that was an
the guy is such a cuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, okay, anyways. That's that for the Reddits, but...
You are an asshole, but your wife's an asshole too, so maybe you guys are meant for each other.
She's worse.
Like,
she's
maybe
worse. It's not even.
The 2 wrongs cancel out now.
No.
Yeah, they can just ride off into the sunset now.
The one night stand, maybe.
The one night stand.
Yeah. Yeah.
She used to give the kidney back. She used to give the kidney back.
So... One of the reasons when you wrote us that I was excited is because the whole trauma thing I feel like is rampant right now. Like everybody's talking about it. And I actually think the positives outweigh the negatives. I think the fact that it's like in the conversation, it's something that people have heard of and are aware of, even if they're not accurate with the information, is better than we were.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Like, I think it's very beneficial, especially for like communities who have been like marginalized and mistreated. Like, I think when there's not a conversation about not just individual but collective trauma, people start to feel like something's wrong with them. Mm-hmm. People don't start to understand their life in context. It's kind of like you were saying, the puzzle pieces.
Right.
What drew you to do, like, I want to work with trauma?
Yeah. So it's like more of like a personal reason, actually. Like, growing up in high school, my family, we were a foster family. And we were licensed to see the little ones. So like the kids who were under 2 years old. And so that was like my intro into like the helping profession. But I was so fascinated, I guess, by this idea of like developmental trauma. So like these are things that are happening when it comes to like attachment development for those early years. And I think that was just like so fascinating to me because I think, again, kids, when they're that young, like they're going to communicate through metaphors. They're going to communicate through their bodies. And I think there's something, I don't know. I think there's just something so different than about how adults or like people who are older and have more language. And so I think I was just always really drawn to like what those critical early childhood experiences can do to a person's life and like how does it affect not just like their view of themselves, but like their perception of the entire world. And I think the narratives that we develop as children like have such a profound impact on us throughout our entire lifetime. So I've just always been really curious about like, let's talk about your childhood, shall we? Like
you've said attunement. You've said attunement like a couple times in this. And like if someone had no idea what that was, like how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think it's just like,
or maybe you said attachment, actually.
Yeah, like attachment. Like I think about just like the security, right? Like when you're a baby and a baby cries, you know, like our you know, not like normal response, but like a response is to be like, oh, let me pick up the baby. Let me console it. Let me rock it. Let me comfort the baby. And I think when it comes to attachment and trauma and things, I think the impact that it has on babies where they don't have a safe or a predictable adult. Or, you know, I've been around adults, but I don't know if I trust adults to help me when things get harder. I don't trust that you're going to keep me safe. And I think that's where that like development and kind of, again, like those perceptions of self. And that's where it comes into like, do I need to fight all of my own battles? Because I don't trust anyone else, or I need to be really hyper vigilant to be on my guards at all times because I don't know if people are going to keep me safe. And so I think when I think about attachment, I think about, you know, just that security of a parent-child or a parent-caregiver relationship and what their sense of safety was like growing up.
So it's like learning I can rely on other humans and they'll help keep me safe.
Exactly.
And then like, it's okay. And then like, you need to answer?
No.
Okay. I was like, it was your daughter. What comes from like, but like what I think a lot of people who have like significant childhood trauma haven't experienced the benefits of vulnerability.
Right.
And putting themselves in a space to like attach to other humans. It's like doesn't feel worth it. It's too scary.
Yeah. Well, not even that it doesn't feel worth it. It's almost like I'm not worthy of it, you know, because I've created this narrative of like, I'm not worthy of love or security or safety. You know, I've deemed everyone, all of you guys to be unsafe, unpredictable, or you're just going to leave like everyone else. And so I think there's a lot of repair that needs to be done, like developmental repair that needs to happen when people are kind of looking at those early experiences.
And would developmental repair be like filling in the gaps?
Yeah, kind of like, let's go back, like, let's do things differently. Let's kind of, let's change the trajectory. Let's think about like, how can we respond in a way that like heals that inner child, you know?
Yeah. So it's like this, I think I'm kind of hearing you say like, it's so important and that's part of why you were drawn to it.
Yeah.
And then also this experience with like fostering. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a sister. I have a younger sister who's biological. And then I have a brother that we adopted from doing foster care.
Okay.
But it was interesting. I mean, you know, he was 9 months old when we first got him. And I think he had been in like 9 different foster homes by the age of like 9 months. And when we, you know, got him, like, if you're familiar with reactive attachment disorder, it was like, he was so rejected, or, you know, he was not like, he didn't allow us to comfort him, or he didn't want, like, he really clung to my mom and like wouldn't let go, you know? And I think it's so much fear, you know, and instability that can happen in those really, really early years that can affect our brain development. It can affect our like stress hormones, that reactivity, you know, that really does kind of wire kids and different families differently.
Yeah. You bring up reactive attachment, and I work in inpatient. And so there's a lot of kids I'm working with who have reactive attachment, and
I see the adults afterwards.
It's often really difficult because what these kids need and want is like a secure connection. However, like a lot of their behaviors I like in quotes push people away.
Totally.
And so then that becomes like the issue, and the dynamic often is like people will adopt. They'll adopt maybe like I've had recently like, you know, maybe a 7-year-old or something, or a 4-year-old, and like the parents are really confused because they understand the concept that maybe you didn't have this before me, but I didn't cause this. So why can't we just form this bond and have you kind of seamlessly join into our family?
But I love you.
And what's going on and what did I do wrong? And like,
what is the thing you're trying to teach then?
You're trying to teach the parent to be steady and less reactive to the kid's reactions.
Got it.
And I think that's where it goes into like that connection piece, you know, when you talked about like, what is it? Like, what modality to use? And it's like, honestly, it's like
across the board.
It's across the board. It's connection. It's showing you I can hold it. I can feel you rejecting me and I'm still going to stay here, you know, because that's that self-fulfilling prophecy. You're expecting me to leave. You're expecting me to like this to be too much for me and to be like, okay, peace out. Like, you're not worth it. You know, like, let me repair this for you. Let me show you how I can do it differently.
And some of the saddest situations I encounter is like when a family doesn't have the tools to actually do what they signed up to do. Like they thought they were going to be able to support this kid and they're not able to deal with like all that comes with their mental health. And then that kid ends up being rejected again. And it's so painful for them. And it becomes difficult for them to, I feel like, value themselves even when they're not feeling valued by others. And then it becomes very like, I think a lot of people feel hopeless.
I don't know what time it is, but I have a question for you around being a therapist and being a mama. Do you have some time? I think so. I think Gabe has some time. I'm curious, how old is your daughter?
She's 3.
She's 3.
3 going on like 16, you guys.
I bet this is like when they start showing those teenage temperaments.
God.
But I don't have kids and Joey doesn't have kids, but I'm curious how it feels doing trauma work with kiddos who are your daughter's age. And just like, you know, not to say that your daughter is similar in any ways or anything like that, but just like her being a child and you working with kids her same age, like what are those differences that, you know, you notice or you notice, you know, her development is different than a kiddo who might have some...
Even relating it just too strongly.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right, or just how does it come up with you and your parenting, if you don't mind? Or just stuff like that.
Well, let me tell you, before I am a therapist, I am a human being.
Shocker.
I go through the ups and downs that all parents do. You know, like I am not a saint by any means just because I specialize in complex trauma or childhood trauma. You know, I think I will say, like, it's interesting because I think about sometimes, like, I'll see kids who are my daughter's age or maybe like a year or two older, and I'll see, like, or I'll hear these experiences that they've gone through. And it just, like, breaks my heart because you think about, like, the innocence, right, of just, like, a really small child. And so I think there is, like, I recognize that I have a lot of privilege, you know, in the way that I'm growing up and the way that my daughter's growing up that sometimes my clients don't have. And so I think you know, I think I definitely have to like take a step back and like show my humanness of like, I get it. Like I lose my shit too, you know, like it's hard and whatnot. But I think it's, you know, again, like you can get in your head sometimes though, too, at the same time, right? Like if my daughter is like doing a play theme or something like that, and I'm like peeping her, I'm like, what is that about? What does that mean? But I mean, I think, I think there's, like it ebbs and flows, but, it is always interesting to kind of look at like how, not just like how different experiences can shape kids, but I also think kids are incredibly resilient too. And so how like being around adults who are safe or secure or coaching parents in ways on how to react differently, what that can do for the kid and what that can do for the parent-child relationship too.
It's one of the best feelings when like a parent is functional enough and a family system is functional enough that there's like, they could make a few small tweaks and that kid would feel very heard and seen.
Totally.
And it's so great to watch it play out of just being like, let's problem solve these couple things and come up with these solutions. I would imagine parenting, it would be hard because you have to be present at work and you have to be present at home with your baby. That would be the hardest part for me. Is because like, most therapists, we check out after work.
Yeah, the mom guilt is real, you guys. Like, the amount of times that I've like been cussed out, had my hair pulled, bit, kicked, screamed at, and I have these like beautiful therapeutic responses for my clients and my kids, and then I go home and my daughter's having a tantrum because we don't have apple juice, and I'm like about to lose my shit. It's like, I can't.
I'm so glad to hear this.
I feel like I sometimes leave because of the intense situations that are happening at work where I'm at. Like, these kids are in distress.
Yeah.
And sometimes I find myself having less empathy for the people around me because I'm like the apple juice situation you said. I'm like, you're fine.
Right.
And I have to like check back in and be like, no, this is like your reality. Yeah. This is like where you are. These are the people who matter to you. And like, in your life, all of these things are valuable and they do matter.
Ooh, that's a good reminder.
You don't get to just because you got to step into someone else's life where like they don't have the space for that. You do. Like, you come on.
Right.
So I think that part's hard. I just have like 2 more questions before we get to Gabe's question. We were talking and you were saying how you wanted to share a story about the Grinch.
Oh my God, you guys.
Wait, I don't know about this.
Okay, my daughter is like obsessed with the Grinch. Like Grinch is like a year-round thing.
Hilarious.
So like
not Christmas, just the Grinch.
When Christmas is around, we get Grinch merch, which is always fun.
Yeah.
But like it's a year-round thing.
Yeah.
But so I've had the chance to watch it so many times, and I have always said, I'm like, you guys, this movie is about childhood trauma.
Wow.
So stay with me.
Okay. Hold on, pause, because I see it immediately. Is it the animation one or the real life one?
You can do either, but you can do either one. So everyone is pretty much familiar, right, with Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Yeah.
And okay, let's just throw out some words. When we think about the Grinch, what do we think of?
Mean.
What else?
Scary. Depressed,
right? So these are his presenting problems.
Yeah.
If Grinch came to us as an adult.
Isolated.
I'm isolated. I'm mean.
Yeah.
People don't want to be around me.
Maybe an eating disorder.
Yeah. I picked up that one yet. I'm gonna think about it.
Very restrictive.
But this is where my child, like, this is where my brain goes, is like, okay, so Grinch, when they do the flashbacks, Grinch grew up without parents. He grew up without a loving home. He grew up in a place where he didn't have people care about him. And every year, every Christmas season, he got to see all these families get together, have these traditions, have these big, meals together, and things that were like glaringly absent from his life, So talk about triggers, right? Every year was a trigger, a reminder of him of this absence, this parental absence that he had. So then throughout his adolescent years, he started to become more externalizing with his behaviors, right? Like he kind of became off-putting to all the people in, what was it, like Whoville? He didn't in Whoville.
Yes.
He didn't jam to anybody in Whoville and kind of had this reputation, right? Like, you're a mean one. You've got, you've got kind of this stank attitude. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, nobody likes me anyways. Let me reject you first before you have the chance to reject me. So I'm going to ostracize myself. I'm going to move to the top of Mount Crumpet away from everybody. And like, that was a coping mechanism,
right?
Like, this has been his whole life, his whole childhood. He has felt undeserving of love. He has felt this abandonment. He has had this yearning for these experiences where he felt safe, secure, had these safe attachments. And in his way, like, it manifested in his world of, I hate Christmas. I'm mean. I don't want to be around people. I'm going to stay up here and like soak in my, like, with his little dog.
Which is also very trauma. That's the only thing he connected with was an animal.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Max, his dog Max. That was like his sidekick.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah. And so I feel like through that story, though, like, you see how these early childhood experiences of being, I think back then it was like, I think they labeled him like the orphan, right? But like, you think about a kid in foster care, you think about a kid who's been in multiple homes, and every Christmas season, they're like, wow,
Everybody else gets this.
Everybody else has a family that comes together. Mm-hmm. Everybody else has these big meals. Like, I've never had that. Mm-hmm. I've never had people want to come around me and sing and open presents and, and so that trigger became this like driving force for his externalizing behaviors of I'm going to be mean, I'm going to be grumpy, I'm going to push people away. Mm-hmm. And then my girl, Cindy Lou Who.
I know. I was thinking
Cindy Lou Who comes in for that developmental repair. She's like,
no, you're so right.
She's like, come here, let me love you. And he's like, I'm not, I'm not into it. Like, again, let me push you away. You're just like everyone else. And she's like, no, really, you can come to my, you can come to my table. There's a spot for you, and it was like that first time I think that she was like, yes, you're mean, you're, ugly, you're up at the top of Mount Crumpet and you deserve love. Like you deserve security. You deserve to spend Christmas with people, with community. And then at the end of the movie, it's like, his heart grows like what, 3 times bigger.
Yeah.
And again, I think that just kind of goes to show not just like about how kids and adults can like manifest these things. But again, it's like these narratives that we tell ourselves in the beginning or those early years of our lives can really influence our perception of the world, of who we are, what we're deserving of.
Right.
So yeah, that's my take on the
Grinch. I love that.
Not to nerd out, but also in the live action one, they like show flashbacks to his like childhood in the live action one, and he was also like bullied when he was trying to conform.
Yes, yeah. Which again, bullying, that's childhood trauma too.
Yeah.
All of those things. And so again, it's like bullying, those pure relationships. That's where that rejection comes in too. Of like, I don't belong here. I don't make friends. People don't like me. So
right, when I put myself out there, I get rejected.
Yeah. Anyway. So that's like Cindy Lou Who comes in and he's like, homegirl. No, thank you. And she's like, wait, but look, like notice how this can feel different.
But I love you anyway.
I love you anyway. Notice how this can feel different. Just totally brought me back to the Washburn. I was like, oh my God. Notice my body. My body is calm right now. I love it.
Could you, one of you guys share what Washburn is? Would you say?
Yeah. So I worked at, or both of us, I guess, worked at Washburn Center.
Way more recently.
Yeah. I did day treatments. When I talked about working with the little ones, I was working with kids who were presenting with pretty like externalizing disruptive behaviors. But again, it was because of trauma. Like they don't have the language quite yet. And so again, the model that we were taught in it was actually called developmental repair, coincidentally. But it really is kind of like showing kids how you can be different, how it can feel different. And
Was Ann Garrity still coming in and teaching seminars?
Yeah.
Gabe, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I'm curious from your perspective, working with children with trauma, is there any sort of like a subtle trauma that, this is like for parents out there, like myself, is there some sort of like slight trauma that happens that a lot of people are not aware of or something like that? That's, I don't know, that you see as like, God, if people knew this,
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's spectromatic, so it's hard.
I'm not a trauma therapist specifically, but I gotta say it's not feeling seen and heard.
I was gonna say
it's not feeling heard. I think parents don't understand. I'm not saying that that's necessarily traumatic for everybody, but like in the theme of like
even damaging
of like when you have trauma and then you feel like your parents don't see or hear you, like that can be really damaging. I don't know what you would think when he says that.
No. I agree. I think, too, what I have seen a lot, too, is not just the parents, but I think specifically in schools, I think there is a huge gap in the way that kids who have trauma present in school and the way that schools then see the behaviors, right? So, like, kids, so, like, let's take the Grinch, for instance, right? So the Grinch, like, let's imagine what Grinch was probably like in schools. He was probably
pushing shit off the
desk, right? Walking out of class.
Calling names.
Provoking kids.
They call it being disruptive,
right? So if the Grinch had parents or foster parents, they were probably getting phone calls all the time. Come pick up the Grinch. They're acting up again. They're being defiant. And really it's like, what's underneath the behavior? Like, what is it that they're seeking? And like, usually it's connection. Like usually it's
see me, look at me.
See me, look at me. I want to feel important.
Yeah. Well, we're so glad we had you on.
Yeah, thank you.
I could listen to you talk for hours. You're so good at explaining. No, you are. I can tell you're a good therapist just by talking to you. And these two know I haven't handed that off to anybody.
No, for sure.
I haven't. I just learning this. I'm just kidding.
No, I have to re-earn mine back.
I'm just
kidding. But to me, I have to re-earn mine back.
Oh, to you, because now you're on your own. You'll be good.
Should we shout out our business one more time? Or whatever? I got the website here.
Plug it.
Yes, Find Your Peace, www.find-your-peace. I have immediate openings. I welcome kids,
Come
teens.
one, come all.
Come one, come all. I don't discriminate. No childhood trauma is the same. There's no shape, size, or form.
And are you taking insurance? Are you doing
I am private pay. I want to prioritize working for my clients. Like I think insurance sets limits on how many sessions they get based on diagnosis. And I think that especially people who have had trauma, like have had enough systems telling them what they can and can't do. Facts. And so I want to work for the client.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, girl.
There you go, girl.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I sing the outro too next time you want
to? It's the end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up. All I want is to go again, but you ain't picking your phone up.
MBC. No relation to NBC.